Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha TV. You're watching To The Point with the host Rajat Kain. In this edition of the show, we're joined with eminent personality, Mr. Pascal Alan Nazareth, former diplomat with area of experience across the world, managing trustee of Sarvodaya International Trust and also author on two fantastic books on Bapu, Mahatma Gandhi. It's 150th year of Bapu's birth anniversary. Straight away, we'll start with you, sir. My first, to begin interaction, post your retirement, we were just having this informal discussion prior to the interview. You mentioned that post your retirement, you started working on Gandhi. What was the reason, perhaps, you were drawn to work on Gandhi?
Mainly because during my last few years in service, when I was ambassador, and I interacted with people at the highest level in every country, president, prime minister, foreign minister, university president, they spoke with such reverence about Mahatma Gandhi. And I found in many of these countries, people have used Gandhi's strategy to bring about major political and social change in those countries. Universities are studying Gandhi's political strategies. And in India, I found, after I retired and came back, even the most dedicated Gandhians who knew everything about Gandhi, what he did in this country, all his padayatras, everything, knew absolutely nothing or very little about Gandhi's impact on the world. So I felt the one contribution I could make was to bring this to their notice. And I was, of course, keen that it should come to the notice of the younger generation in India, who didn't know that much about Gandhi as we did in our age, during the time we grew up. So when I wrote this book, I wrote it deliberately in a language which even a high school student could read. Maybe this is the reason for its enormous success. This book, I might say and point out in all modesty, has broken all records for a book on Gandhi, except a book written by Gandhi himself. It's come out in 12 Indian languages and 23 foreign languages, including Arabic and French and German and Greek and even Mandarin. There was no book on Gandhi published for almost 50 years in China, because the great Mao said that power grows out of the barrel of a gun. Gandhi said, no, it grows out of the power of the human spirit. So I certainly feel very happy that this book has come out in so many languages. And I feel very fulfilled with this. So as a sequel to this book, I wrote my second book,
Your first book came in year 2008,
Yeah.
Gandhi's Outstanding Leadership.
2006.
2006.
Yeah.
And the second book came last year in December,
Yes.
Gandhi, the Soul Force Warrior.
Yes.
Let's start with the man himself.
Yes.
It's 150th year of Bapu's
yes,
birth anniversary. I'm sure he is one of the most documented person, both in written as well as in the films.
Very much so.
If we start about Gandhi, what is one thing that drew you towards him? He has several facets. He appears to be a very simple person in a loincloth and a stick and staff, but he is a very complex narrative. To begin with, what is that one facet that drew you towards Gandhi?
It was the amazing transformation in the man. He has gone to London, got himself a British legal degree. Anyone else with a British legal degree would have been strutting around like a peacock, like dear Mr. Jinnah. This man comes to India, gets his first brief from some unfortunate old lady, and then goes to court to argue it. He's so nervous, he's trembling all over. He has forgotten what he has read in the brief. He has writes in his autobiography, everyone in the court, including the judge, was laughing at him. There was nothing he could do except return the brief to this unfortunate old lady and leave the court. He never went back to court thereafter. So when he got an invitation to go to South Africa, where his main job was to translate Gujarati documents into English so that they could be presented in court. He was very happy and he went there. Then he gets thrown out of a train. He has caused no disturbance. He has got a first-class ticket. The only thing wrong about him was the color of his skin. He's thrown out of the train. And then that is his moment of transformation. Here's this timid, young, London-educated lawyer becomes suddenly a revolutionary and an amazing thing. And mainly because I believe of two important spiritual inputs in him. Mm-hmm. The most important was the Bhagavad Gita. What is the message of the Bhagavad Gita? Simple one. When you are faced with injustice and evil, you have no option. Your duty is to stand up and confront it. Whether you succeed or whether you not is not your concern. And even if the evil that you see is located in your own family or your own brother, you still have no option. You have to stand up and confront it. What are the consequences thereof also is no concern of yours. One important input. That's why this man, at the age of 24, decides that he must now confront the evil that he has been confronted with. But there's another important input, and that is Christ. First input is from Krishna, this is from Christ. What is the message of Christ? You must love one another. Love one another as I have loved you. Redemption will come through the crucifixion. Self-suffering is very important. You must be willing to suffer and die for your cause, but never to hurt anyone. Now, the combination of these two messages of Lord Krishna and Lord Jesus Christ is what I believe makes Gandhi such a revolutionary figure. And he had a simple sort of message. For Gandhi, truth was God. So when you stand up for the truth, you're putting God on your side. So you cannot lose, because by definition, God cannot lose. Of course, you might not live to see the success of your cause, but that's not important. You might even have to die for that cause, but the cause will not lose. The cause will succeed. That was the simple message with which he started in South Africa. When he told his fellow Indians there, mind you, most of them were Muslims at that stage, that we must stand up, and they all laughed at him. They said, what do you think you can do? We've all lived in this country. We know there are some things we cannot do. So we don't do them. What do you think you can do? He says, no, we must do something. The passes that we carry, only we have to carry as Indians, is a badge of our dishonor and our humiliation. Right. We are going to burn the pass. This is how it started. Amazingly, it was on 9/11, 1906. So 9/11 we all talk about now is not the first 9/11. This was the first 9/11. This is how it all starts. And you know what happened, yes, thereafter.
You mentioned about Bapu's draw towards spirituality and eternal cause of religion, especially from Gita and Bible. Was there a gradual transformation in the man himself to be drawn towards the spirituality and religion, or were there any other sparks in life? Like, as you mentioned, the transformation from being a timid lawyer to a revolutionary was possibly from the incident at Pietermaritzburg, when he was thrown out of the train. But in terms of religion and spirituality, who were the drivers as to were there any personal influences at home? Because he came from a fairly spiritual, religious family. His mother and wife, they came from Pranami Samaj, and they were devotee of a very beautiful practice of Pranami Samaj.
No, he was certainly influenced greatly by them. He followed all the religious practices. But he has recorded in his biography, he passed through an atheistic phase. I think at the point at which he went to London, religion was the last thing in his mind. He goes to London and he joins the Vegetarian Society, the vegetarian. And he has taken also an oath which his mother made him take, that he will always stay vegetarian and he will not drink alcohol. Now, in the Vegetarian Society, one of them asked him about the Bhagavad Gita. He's ashamed. He has not even read it. So he begins to read it, and then he gets hooked on it completely. That then, as he records, become his encyclopedia of daily reference. It's also in London for the first time he is introduced to the Bible. And then he says he reads the Bible. The Old Testament, he said, revulsed him. Uh, as it does me also, I'm afraid. But then the New Testament, particularly the Sermon on the Mount, influenced him very deeply. So in London, he and we have to be grateful that he got his British legal degree, with which then at every stage he beat the British with the British legal degree that he acquired in London. And then he has got these two very important inputs. He's also introduced to Buddhism for the first time there through Christopher Isherwood, I think, Light of Asia, that he has read. He also has read Edwin Arnold's, Hymn Celestial about the Bhagavad Gita. So London really has transformed him. It has made him for the first time deeply religious. But as he goes through life, he has risen above religion into the realm of spirituality. One of the very important sentences in Gandhi's life and autobiography is that he says, "My religion transcends Hinduism and binds one firmly to the truth." By doing so, Gandhi has raised religion above the level of religion to spirituality, which is what the world desperately needs today. The great tragedy of the world is there's too much of religion and too little of the spirituality which it desperately needs. Religion is all like paths up a mountain. You take the eastern path and you say, "My God, what a magnificent view. This is the best view of all." You take the western path, you see the western view, you see the... But when you get to the top, that's the best view of all because it's the all-inclusive view. You see everything. Spirituality is getting to the top and not quarreling about which path is better than the other. And the tragedy of the world is we are killing each other, saying that my prophet is greater than yours, instead of focusing on the Father in heaven. Gandhi used to say, in heaven there are no religions. There's only a Father and they're all his children.
If one has to simplify it, if we go through your books, do I find Gandhi more spiritual or more religious?
Well, he was certainly deeply religious at the beginning, but I believe towards the end, he certainly became far more spiritual, particularly after he took the vow of brahmachari.
Okay.
Yeah. And that also increased greatly his power. You can't deny that he had an incredible power. You can call it charisma. No other man really has been able to rouse millions of people. It's the largest people's power movement in history. What an amazing thing. I recently delivered a lecture at the National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bangalore. And Gandhi as a management icon. If you think of what this man did, he has come with this esoteric gospel of truth and non-violence. And then he inspires the whole people. He trains them in this form of where you have to suffer. Your bones might be broken, you'll be imprisoned, you might get killed. And yet people follow him by the thousands and become fearless. Here is a man who was so timid in his youth. His motto now is, "He who fears fails." So he has become fearless himself. He has also been able to instill this in his followers. Incredible. He fundraises for them. He negotiates on their behalf, does everything and then gives them what he wants. I can't think of a greater management achievement I describe it as the greatest management achievement of the 20th century. In fact, a man called Alan Axelrod has written a book on Gandhi exactly on this. He calls it Gandhi CEO. Incredible. And he has given 14 different reasons what makes Gandhi such an excellent CEO. And he places great importance on what he calls his talisman, to always focus on the poorest of the poor. If you do that, then you are building a whole society from the bottom upwards. I believe today we should also be doing the same, to focus much more on the poorest of the poor rather than the rich investor.
Certainly, Gandhi was a great organizer, as we see. As you mentioned about a fantastic, great movement for Indian independence. But was he always the same? Do we see a glimpse of that character in his childhood or during school days? Or was he a shy person, very shy student or a shy lawyer, as you say, have butterflies and tummies that he even forgot his brief? Where did that transformation of being a fantastic organizer came from? Being a revolutionary is one thing, and then an organization person is other.
Yes, what you call to strategize. Yeah. And the amazing thing for me also about Gandhi, incidentally, in his youth, there was nothing remarkable about Gandhi. He was not particularly good in his, either in his class, nor in sports, nor in public speaking.
Well, regarding that, I would say in sports, I learned he played cricket.
He learned cricket, but never became a very great cricketer.
He defeated Britishers in their own game.
He defeated them in much bigger games. Yeah, I believe really his transformation came in London, from discovering the Bhagavad Gita there. Until then, well, he followed all the religious practice. He was deeply dedicated to his mother. As we know, in his youth, I think the one thing strong about him was his libido. But thereafter, his main transformation, spiritual, has taken place, I believe, in London. As he goes through life, then, he has become more and more spiritual. And towards the end, he was certainly the most deeply spiritual leader, most probably in all of history, a spiritual political leader, and the most inspiring. And I believe he will certainly live very long in history. Yeah.
While dealing with Gandhi as a subject, what was the most complicated part of his life? Was it his youth? I mean, was it his childhood or a youth or years in South Africa or years back in India? Because profiling Gandhi is difficult, and you profiled him twice. So which were the most complicated portions you found while you were writing or penning it down?
Yeah, I think the most difficult period of his life, I believe, was really the last decade, because 1939, the war had broken out. And this was the time, actually, there was a division in the national movement. There was one group of Indians, deeply patriotic, who felt that this was the opportunity for India to take advantage of the British.
Right.
That is why Subhash Chandra Bose left the country and tried to negotiate with the Germans and the Japanese to help India, and set up an Indian national army, which then came the master of Burma, arrived in eastern India. Now Gandhi had the greatest regard for Subhash Chandra Bose as a great patriot, but he believed, and I agree with Gandhi on that to bring the Japanese into India, throw the British out, would be like flying from the frying pan into the fire. Because the Japanese had done terrible things in China. They had done terrible things in Burma, which initially had welcomed them into the country. They had come into the Andaman Islands, done terrible things there also.
Yes.
This was what Gandhi felt. But there was, in a way, a division in the national movement there, because of which I believe Gandhi, in terms of strategy, so as not to lose the initiative completely, declared the Quit India movement, which I believe was rather is controversial. And in fact, as a good strategist, he should have known that by doing so, he was going to be arrested. Not only he, but the entire Congress leadership was arrested and put in jail, and left the entire field open to Jinnah. They lost the entire advantage, the political advantage. And I am afraid this is what ultimately led to the division of India. Gandhi was the one who opposed it most of all. And this not many people know that quite often he is being blamed for the partition. But he did everything possible to prevent the partition of India, because he saw that partition wouldn't solve any problems. He believed religions were meant to unite people, not to divide them. The thing which upset him most of all, not only that India was being divided, that the Indian army was being divided. People who had fought shoulder to shoulder bravely in a whole lot of battlefield, now we're going to be divided and facing each other. He said, what are they going to do? They will now be facing each other. And see the tragedy today, we are facing each other with nuclear bombs in our hand. So I believe this was a very difficult situation. I believe in many ways Gandhi died broken-hearted. Because all that he struggled, the last thing he wanted was a divided India. And an India divided by religion. And the sort of massacres that took place, it is a great blot.
Yep.
On India, on both India and Pakistan, and on both the community. It's the greatest tragedy, really, I must say. And that is why, on Independence Day, it was a day of mourning for him. He was not in Delhi, not part of the rejoicing. He was in Calcutta. Yeah. And sadly on that, he was also broken-hearted, because two of his closest disciples, both Nehru and Patel, disagreed with them. They felt that there was no way, that India would run with dear Mr. Jinnah around. That it would be, well, if he wanted it, let him take it and let him go. But as we know, that never solved any problems. It's only made them worse. And Gandhi, I believe, foresaw it. And that is why, in a way, he said, well, since we couldn't prevent the inevitable, let us at least live as good neighbors. That's why he wanted to go and spend some time in Pakistan. And I believe that's why he was assassinated. He was then accused of being a friend of Pakistan. He was not. He was a friend of India, yeah. Incidentally, a great compliment paid to him is by Arnold Toynbee. He said Gandhi was as much a friend of Britain as he was of India. He made it impossible for us to continue ruling India, but he made it possible for us to leave India with dignity and without bitterness and rancor. And that's really true. And Gandhi had always said, non-violent struggle is not a program for seizure of power. It's an effort to bring about a change of relationship. No, Abraham Lincoln said something like this 100 years earlier. The best way to get rid of an enemy is to make him your friend. And when the British are leaving India, almost the first act of independent India is to ask the last viceroy to be the first Governor General of India. What an amazing thing. A sure example of his thing about change of relationship, coming true. It's a vindication of that.
Most of work on Gandhi has been written in retrospect, post his demise. And we don't often come across the title as you've used in the second book, Gandhi, the Soul Force Warrior. What are, the main characteristic that you're pointing out here in this title itself? We hardly come across Soul Force Warrior on Gandhi.
Yeah, now the Gandhi had conceptualized the strategy. He wanted a word for it. Satyagraha was not the word selected by him. It was, I think, selected by one of his nephews. But he more or less made it something like a competition. He wanted a suggestion from all of us. So someone came up with someone, I think, initially wanted to use it as Sadagraha or something. And he said, no, Satyagraha is better. Now, Satyagraha is understood in India, firmly clinging to the truth. It certainly wouldn't fly in the US. So Martin Luther King only used the word soul force. Gandhi has also used the word soul force. In fact, he said, soul force is God within you. So he has used this. He has used the word soul. He has given various descriptions. He has called it love force. He has called it a non-violent revolution. He has even called it a thought revolution. So soul force was the word used there. Now, the other thing was the 20th century was the century of revolutions. A whole lot of revolutions of all types, nationalist, fascist, communist, so on. All of them triggered with hate and accompanied with enormous violence. Gandhi has used a new type of revolution based on love, deep faith in God, and commitment to the truth. By doing so, he has spiritualized revolution and revolutionized it. There is no hatred in it. There is no violence in it, except a deep faith in God. That is why he has revolutionized revolution and spiritualized it.
Before we wrap up, just one last question, sir. Given Gandhi's personality, his experiments, his approach towards revolution was Gandhi's India. By India, I mean the undivided India, which is struggling for its independence, or rather, I mean, working for its independence. Was it also a leader for several other countries in the world who were subjugated by imperialism?
Very much so. Very much so. Not many people are aware of this. When India became independent and joined the United Nations, it was the 37th member of the United Nations. Today there are 193. Between 1947 and 1997, when the last colony of Hong Kong was added back to China, more than 120 or 130 countries became independent. This is the largest democratization, if I may say. It's certainly the most radical change in international political geography there ever was. In 50 years, all the European empires disappeared. And I just want to point out, in the Second World War, to get rid of 3 dictators, one in Germany, one in Italy, one in Japan, 50 million people were killed. Now, all these enormous changes have taken place. No doubt people have died. You add them all up, they don't even add up to 50,000. Václav Havel of Czechoslovakia described the Soul Force Revolution as the power of the powerless. This is what Gandhi gave to the world, that even the poorest of the poor, even a child, even an old man, can all be revolutionary. The only thing you need to do is to stand up for the truth bravely, be willing to suffer and to die for it, and to never to give it.
Right, right. Sir, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to have you here. Such an honor to interview you. We look forward to read more from you. So clearly, it was amazingly insightful interaction with Mr. Pascal Alan Nazareth, and we look forward to read more from him. Thanks for watching To The Point on Rajya Sabha TV. Thank you.